G'day, guys. Welcome to another Hash It Out with CW. Joining once again, we have Armeanio and Noah. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, guys.
Pleasure to be here.
So it's happened again, another DeFi hack. This time it was the Nomad Bridge, unfortunately. Lost 190 million in liquidity, which is pretty crazy. It's happened once again. What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, I'm going to start by
another one bites the dust.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying that I wouldn't call this a hack. I would call this an exploit. There's a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is if something is operating within how it's programmed to operate, even though it's designed wrong and people have the wrong assumptions, is that a hack? Or is that simply exploiting something that is available? There's a difference. There's a distinction. Like if I hack your computer, CW, I come into your space. Number one, like that's an aggressive act. And let's say you and Noah have a multi-sig wallet, and I steal your keys, right? And then I use those keys that I stole entering your space and exploit a bunch of money. Okay, that's what I would call a hack. Now, when you have just like an exploit, something is programmed the wrong way. It's working as it's intended to work in terms of how the functions are, compiling, processing, but it was designed wrong. So it opens an interesting question. Like, is there a difference in that opinion? Is it still terrible to see people, lose money? Absolutely. But I wouldn't call it a hack. I would call it an exploit, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a very good point because people are playing within the rules of the code itself. It's just unfortunate that another $190 million have sort of gone down the gurgler once again. In regards to the sort of exploit side of things, it's an interesting sort of point of view, actually. Like you mentioned, obviously hacking, it's stepping into people's space and sort of compromising people's positions and things like that. But yeah, this was definitely playing within the rules of what the protocol allowed.
Yeah, it's the saddest part is that apparently from, all of this is still, this literally happened like 3 hours ago, but apparently there was a public audit that was done on this contract, and it was flagged by the audit, and they chose to ignore it. So it could have been avoided, which is the really heartbreaking thing. If anybody's liable, it's the protocol itself, and people realized that they could interact with it in a certain way. Then everyone else realized that they could interact with it in a certain way, and it was very easy to replicate. And pretty soon, you've got a decentralized bank run on your hands, and here we are.
Yeah, once again, unfortunately, that audit side of things is an interesting sort of topic as well, because a lot of people seem to assume if there's if a protocol or a project or some code's gone under an audit, then everything's safe and hunky-dory. But obviously, going by the commentary that's written in that audit, the auditors themselves have said that they might not understand the actual issue that's at stake here, and provided some commentary around the grounds of what it is, how it sort of happens as well. So that's an interesting take as well.
Auditing is a good thing, right? I'm never against hiring a firm, but let's take it back to like human reality, right? You're hiring a company to review a code that, it's hard to say. There are some specialty firms that have pretty deep knowledge of some systems, but some systems are new. So, there's no like pre-existing advantage. If a language came out, somebody audits ErgoScript. Okay, well, ErgoScript is X years old. So, there's a lot of people in our ecosystem who really an auditor has no advantage in terms of like time or experience over, some of our developers. Then you have to ask, okay, well, whose desk did it actually land on, right? And then you get into the human element. Was it, the senior developer that's been there forever? Was it a team? Was it somebody who'd been there for 3 weeks and was kind of green? And our industry's been really hot. So I imagine that a lot of these infrastructure providers have been trying to scale with demand, which means they're bringing on new people, and human error is always a risk, right?
But then also sort of edits to the code itself. So obviously the audit was taking place at a certain snapshot in time, and everything sort of from that time backwards was audited. If a line of code's changed, how does that sort of complicate things going forward? Do you have to go and get re-audited? And is the audit then sort of still valid? Like, in my opinion, no.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing if a project gets audited and then the audit is ignored. It's like, what is, if that is the path that they choose to go down, what is the goal? Like, what was the reason that they chose to get an audit in the first place? Is it a marketing thing? Is it I just don't understand why you would get an audit and then ignore the results of the audit. That just doesn't make sense to me. It seems foolish.
I think usually what you would have in that type of audit is you would have things that do come up flagged by priority, right? And so being that each team has limited resources, they'll probably start chopping at the things that are high priority and moving towards what's seen as lower priority. That's a process. And then you have to ask the question, okay, well, let's say they go through that list. Are they then going to go back and get re-audited, or are they going to call it a day? That's money. Like audits are not cheap in this space. That's something that I think if the user saw some of the quotes, they would gasp.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
And it was a bit unfortunate the flag, but this one was actually considered low risk as well. So it's pretty intriguing that was sort of considered low risk, and look what was at stake.
Yeah, I know we always talk about this on this show, and it may feel like beating a dead horse, but that really is the value of open source code, where it's not required for a third party to go in and audit your code. People can go in and check it out in the community. And my guess is that Nomad is not open source. I don't know. Maybe they are.
I jumped onto their repo and had a quick squiz through there, and there's plenty of code up there. But the interesting point that I sort of take out of it is, like we just sort of mentioned, in regards to the audit side of things. But it's a interesting sort of topic there. Get an audit, receive feedback, dismiss the feedback, and then look what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's why I think the best alternative is just open source, battle tested on testnet, have bounties out there if there's any bugs, try to engage developers, get as many people's eyes on it as possible before you start running a lot of value.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's pretty critical as well, isn't it? Just battle test all these sort of systems, because ultimately people's ultimate lives can be at risk by putting as much sort of money. They might not have as much, might not have much liquidity themselves, and sort of are using these protocols to try and elevate themselves out of sort of some socioeconomic environment or something along those lines. So, yeah, it's pretty unfortunate that it keeps happening time and time again.
Yeah, it's got me thinking about incentives, and with something like Nomad specifically, they had a whole bunch of VC investors, and I'm sure there were deliverables that were expected by certain deadlines and things like that. When you have people investing in your product, there's an expectation that you deliver what you say you're going to deliver in a timely manner. And, for a third party anonymous exploiter, the incentives are very different than, the incentive to acquire $190 million is maybe higher than the incentive to complete a deadline. You can't equate the two, but if there are vulnerabilities out there and there's a lot of funds that you could stand to gain, there's going to be people that are going to seek those exploits every single time. And with something like a bridge where there's a liquidity pool, it you know, you should look at liquidity pools as potential exploitable like bags of cash. And if you are storing your coins there, to whether it's like a bridged asset on another chain or even like a liquidity pool in a DEX, you know, there's risk in that. And you shouldn't look at the potential gain of bridging something or, you know, farming something, whatever, without considering the risks involved in doing so.
Yeah, I think that ties into something else that we seem to be sort of logging that dead horse, and it's just basically around assumptions, security assumptions, risk assumptions, privacy assumptions. It kind of goes along those lines as well.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic seeing retail get burned. You know, it's one of those things that the reality is the best thing that shows strength in designs is time. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't imagine like this team expected this or had any expectation that this was going to happen. You know, so it's one of those things. It's very unfortunate. And then it's like, okay, well, you know, you always have like the event itself, and then you kind of have like cascading effects from it. You know, like who lost the most money? Were they in a position that they owed money to somebody else? Were there project treasuries involved? You know, there's a lot of, you know, let's just say we know that $190 million was lost. We don't really know whose and how they're affected by it. Mm-hmm. You know, it could be a pretty diverse actor set. It's sad.
Yeah, something I've been following closely over the last few hours is just because it's a little closer to home than like the ETH ecosystem. On a DEX on the Cardano network called Wing Riders, they had wrapped stable coins and wrapped Bitcoin and things like that were bridged on the Nomad Bridge. And basically they're completely unbacked now, and like the liquidity in those pairs on that DEX, I think it was 20 million in liquidity a few hours ago, and now it's like down to 1 million, and the price of ADA on there has skyrocketed to like almost $3 because everyone's trying to exit that pair to, you know, it's basically an IOU ticket that has nothing. The USDC that it's redeemable for just doesn't exist anymore. So everyone's trying to, you know, escape that position. And the ripple effects are really interesting to see. If there's projects on Cardano that had their treasury in MAD USDC to farm, you know, they're screwed now. they're absolutely screwed. Who knows if anybody did, but yeah, it's just sad. And it's a matter of risk management, and you know, I would hope that treasuries wouldn't overextend in that way, but it's happened before and it'll happen again.
Sure, and if it's the assumption that it's backed by USDC, it's seen as a safe bet.
Yeah,
you know, I have a very unpopular opinion about stablecoins, and that is that I like, let's say SIG USD is a good example. It's in the Ergo ecosystem. It's backed by $1. People have said, hey, let's list it on a exchange. Let's push it cross chain. And in my opinion, that's really dumb. And the reason why is because the liquidity that's actually backing it is on Ergo. Why would you want to leave the ecosystem that its assumptions are designed to operate in? It wasn't designed to have a market maker and, you know, try to balance pairs in multiple ecosystems. And there's a ton of complexity there to keeping markets liquid and, you know, making sure slippage doesn't occur and, you know, I guess potentially profiting across, you know, multiple markets with the slippage. So in my opinion, the best assumption with like a ecosystem specific stablecoin is keep it in that ecosystem.
That's a unique point, actually, because you're sort of spreading the liquidity pool out, but then also opening up some vulnerabilities there by providing some sort of more access for the bridging side of things. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
And with something like UST, USDC, they have native liquidity on chains, and they manage that on the back end. They are probably the liquidity provider, and every once in a while you'll see like, oh, we're moving X million, from this chain to this chain. That's usually them balancing liquidity across markets. In a decentralized system, in a trustless environment, it's really difficult to do that. I think that bridging is an interesting concept. I think there's a lot of use to it, but you do have the ability to, it's like a blood transfusion, right? If there's anything that's wrong in subject A and it moves to subject B, that's potentially a problem. It's potentially a problem if one ecosystem is hacked and you have, wrapped assets in another ecosystem. There are some, serious risks that just bridging in and of itself, kind of open the door to. And the reality is most people don't know that or care.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate thing as well. Like we've touched on it, I don't know, countless times on this show, is just trying to raise awareness and get people to ask questions. I think in the documentation on the Nomad Bridge itself, there was a comment there for the long-term security, and it was just a little title there saying to do. So people sort of interacting with these systems need to start asking questions and sort of diving into sort of what they're getting into, instead of just sort of just going by a quick crypto term, aping into things.
Yeah, it's very easy to do, speaking from experience.
Yeah, I think the best
when you're inexperienced.
No, it's very true. I think that it's good to look at a lot of these systems as experimental until time passes, right? Especially for new users. When you do have, let's say, centralized custodians in the, traditional market, they handle risk for you, and they have insurance, right? And so most people are so accustomed to having all of their risk assumptions put off on that third party that's insured, and that they don't even think of that way.
Yeah.
Because if it happens, if this were to happen between banks, somebody's liable.
Right.
And, then lawyers are coming to the table, and somebody's going to eat that loss one way or another. In a decentralized system, we don't have that counterparty, which means that each person has to take responsibility for, let's just say when things don't quite go the way they thought they were going to go. There's no counterparty that's insured that's going to back you up. And
I think the idea of like a decentralized insurance could be really incredible, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, well, it depends on the value of the hack. I mean,
yeah, true.
It's a terrible thing when it happens. You can look at like I like the One community. They were one that got exploited. They have a lot of, fresh creative ideas, developers that are excited to build neat shit. Their ecosystem kind of has an issue that the majority of people there weren't really involved in, and now they inherit a ton of drama, in terms of like, how do you be responsible for that? At that point, you're in like ethical triage is what I call it.
Yeah.
There is no right choice or winning or making everyone whole. There's no medicine to treat everybody. What are you going to do? Somebody's going to lose, right? I hope we never get there in the ergo ecosystem, that's for sure. But the best thing we can do is really try to understand the assumptions. And in my opinion, bridging, in and of itself, you're inheriting risk, right? Because you're dealing with assets that are on another chain that has its own consensus and its own potential exploits and, blah, 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 right? But then a lot of these are just designed to be fast, right? And so far that has not proven to be a good year. It's been a terrible year for bridge hacks. I mean, I think we're above 1 billion, maybe 1.1 now.
Well above, I think.
No, we're almost up to 2. If not over now. This might have tipped over.
Yeah, so that's insane. That's
yeah. I think it was I think it was the 14th of July. We were up around 2 billion. So I'm pretty sure this would have ticked over, unfortunately. That's a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, no kidding.
I give you 2 billion reasons why we should slow down. Right.
And that's just this year alone. Like, look at what's happened in the past as well.
Yeah. It's a hard thing because to really build, decentralized trust assumptions that are hard, it's inefficient. That's the problem. Like, if you want to diagnose like the main problem, is that like the best security assumptions you can create are inefficient, and the market is geared towards people wanting fast.
One thing that sort of, I don't know, I'd like to sort of dive into is that the way contracts are constructed in the Ethereum sort of ecosystem with the EVM model and Solidity, or is there any sort of assumptions to be made in regards to EUTXO and the native or the DSLs on those ones, like say ErgoScript or Plutus, or things along those lines? A whole different sort of architecture. I wonder what sort of assumptions that are there.
I think the assumption set in extended UTXO is more clear, right? That doesn't mean people are going to build things right every time.
Yeah.
You give someone the perfect tools, and they make a mistake. Maybe they have an issue. And the reality is, yeah, you saw that. Yeah. The reality is, I think that ergo improvement protocols are a great way to kind of bootstrap common concepts and have like design standards. But I think that ultimately, we really need to expand there as we grow, and that's a big part of why I push for open source code. That way, if someone figures out how to do something unique and do it right, they hopefully are willing to make that like a good public knowledge, just to protect users. Because guess what? Sometimes if I build my own closed source ecosystem, and so does CW, right? And I have a problem, it's very possible that CW is going to inherit, that issue, right?
I've got plenty of issues, mate. Don't you worry. But that aside, it's definitely having that brains trust and people to sort of decipher everything and just getting multiple eyes over it. But the ecosystem itself would probably sort of lose out, because you'll have users using different bits and pieces throughout the ecosystem as well. So if they're not directly affected in exploit A, they might sort of come unstuck by the ramifications of that somewhere else in the protocol.
Yeah, I think with the bridges that we see coming to Ergo in the near future, we have the Rosen Bridge, and we have, I know Anita Bitcoin is working on their interlay bridge. I don't really know where they're at with it, but, I know MHS SAM, and I know you're working on it too, Armeanio. I know that will be open source for sure, and I've talked to Frosty and really pushed to make sure that their bridge is also open source, just because the stakes are so high, and it would be so devastating for our community to have something like this happen. Even though the TVL would probably be less than what something like Nomad has, I think it would be just devastating. Everyone.
No, it is. It's painful to see retail get burned. And that's actually a really good thing to really explore, examine, and push for in terms of having open architecture, is that when you're building on a network and one of these, let's say larger dApps or services fails, everybody suffers.
Yeah, it's like a contagion.
Yeah, it is. It's it's great to let's say have competition and diversity in a network, but then there is a certain point where it's like you're on the same team to some degree, and if one issue comes in one place, it very well can spread across the ecosystem, and potentially that network as a whole can suffer.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, actually, just not to be complacent. Obviously, people sort of have in their mind that there's certain risk assumptions or security assumptions and things like that, but it's not in anyone's interest to sort of sit on their laurels and become complacent with that sort of mindset as well. It's like question everything and dive into everything. Think about or ask questions whether you're doing something the right way. Can it be improved? Things like that. So I think that's a sort of good point as well.
Yeah, and I think the Ergo community is pretty tight knit. Everyone, the spirit is very positive. Everyone trying to work together, but there are people that are nefarious. That we have people like the Bear Whale months ago, last year now.
He's still around.
He's still around. I don't know how successful he is, but I know there were people that were this isn't really an exploit, but they were modifying like the Ergodex bots so that they would always get their share and nobody else would. There's really smart people out there in this space, including in our community, that they maybe don't have the best intentions. And as amazing as our community is, you have to keep that in mind. I think you've said this before, Armeanio. You should operate under the assumption that everyone's trying to steal your assets all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to roll in this space. It's you can't remove human nature, right? You can't remove human nature from the actors in the ecosystem, but if you can build things that are open source and transparent, you can have kind of like a collective trust and understanding of how things operate. When you're talking about like the human individual aspect, good luck having that level of transparency, understanding, their intent, where they're coming from, what they're going to do. And that's one of the values of open source code is that, even in traditional businesses, can you really see inside them, understand how they operate, understand what their intent is, understand what you're even interacting with. Most of the time, no.
Yeah. Obviously, on those sort of systems, there's sort of an element of trust or a different layer of trust in these systems that's sort of decentralized and things like that. It's an interesting point, that one.
Yeah, people go to restaurants all the time and they see like a sticker on the window. We've been audited. We got this grade, but what does it mean for what's happening in the kitchen today? And if
speaking from experience, not much.
It's never fun.
Yeah, and I mean that's reality. Everybody kind of understands that. You make a trust assumption when you go into a place and they feed you, right? Then maybe they were, maybe they had their health inspection and blah blah blah. But it's really nice to be able to see into the kitchen, see what's happening on the, and that's the beauty of open source is that. It doesn't happen overnight. It sometimes can be a messy process, but over time, what happens is these systems get better and better and better. The trust assumptions improve, the understanding of these, look at ETH as a perfect example, right? How quickly did it take them to put together this postmortem?
Yeah, it was basically, pretty much instantly. Sort of see some things going around. It was about half an hour or so. The collective mindshare there by people diving in and exploring what happened, how it happened, and then the timeframes that happened. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the Ethereum ecosystem catches a lot of shit, but that's one thing I do respect a lot about their development community is they have done an excellent job in terms of open source education and getting a collective understanding that's continually progressing in terms of how to design things, how they work. I'd love to see us follow that same trajectory in the Ergo ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Just in regards to open source, I saw a comment on one of your tweets. I think it was this morning, actually, just around many users not knowing or being able to read code. So that's maybe one sort of downside in regards to open source systems. But I've also heard that you've said that you have the collective trust of numerous people using these things. So people may have had their eyes run over it and things like that, but then you trust it because there's a larger user base, because you're like the collective sort of the common there in regards to the everyone using the protocol itself. So you've got that trust element that's already sort of been built into tried and tested sort of side of things.
Yeah, on the end of the human side of open source potential that I don't like, you have people that are just uncreative. That's what I'm going to call them. They have no creativity. They'll just fork something, throw a new sticker on the front, and say it's a new competitor. Let's try to outmarket. Right? It's ridiculous, in my opinion. Now, the cool thing that happens oftentimes is it's like a dissection, where a programmer will come in, they'll take a part from over here, they'll take a part from over there, they'll take a part from there, and they'll create their own idea. Maybe build something new that kind of adds a new functionality or new just concept into that. But they kind of have the ability to scrap parts from everything and put that together, and that creates a tremendous amount of creativity. And the reality is, I think that, like, from the perspective of someone who invests a lot of their own personal time, energy, maybe even money, and they build something that's open source, and then to have someone just take it, slap a new sticker on it, and try to outmarket the original. I can certainly understand like the drawback to that, but I think collectively as a community we can call bullshit where it needs to be called.
Yeah, I think so. And having the ability to sort of Frankenstein together different open source projects, I think that's one of the best ways for new developers to learn, probably. I'm not a developer, but I would imagine, having pieces to choose from is a lot easier than trying to write something from scratch. And as somebody who doesn't know a lot, you learn a lot from what other people have done already. And I think, to your point, CW, about what you said about, oh man, I can't even remember what you said, but it was something to the point of just open source being important for people to be able to audit and make sure that the code is working. I think even for somebody who doesn't know how to read code, I'm not a developer, I can't read code, but I spend a lot of time, trawling through GitHub, looking at what projects are doing. Even if you're just an investor or somebody that is you want to understand what's going on with a project, you can learn a lot even if you don't know code, just by going through their GitHub, looking at what they're doing. Is it a fork with a sticker on it? Do they have some old code that was reused and they forgot to take out that it was from Binance Smart Chain? If you do some snooping, you can find out a lot of information even if you can't read code. And the bullshitters kind of become obvious pretty quick. So if
One thing that's great in regards to GitHub is just the documentation, and you'll know a sort of good project from one that sort of may not be as trustworthy, in my opinion, is regards to documentation. A lot of the guys seem to have everything really well documented. Even the code itself is sort of documented and commented out. I think that's sort of really good.
Yeah, for people that are in the community that are investors or traders or whatever, I encourage you to go on GitHub, and it's intimidating. It's super intimidating. You don't know what any of it is, but it's a good way to learn.
See if there's even a conversation.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, is this a real engagement between developers?
If there's no PRs, if there's no outstanding PRs, if there's no conversation about the PRs, there's no development community, at least that's open and transparent and trying to pull people in. You know, one thing that Alex loves to do is he loves to be like, let's talk about DeFi, right? Because he wants people to come in and bounce their ideas off of things. You know, even if it's, you know, every once in a while we run into an idea that's a little wacky or funny, why not, right? Every once in a while, somebody, you know, out there spits gold. They don't even know it.
Think outside of the box that numerous sort of brain trusts might not have thought about, and it's just that some simple little topic, and it just makes something click.
Yeah, I think there's people that are so outside the way that a developer thinks can sometimes be the most creative, because the sort of like thought patterns that are like drilled in, maybe you know, I don't know if that's true, but at least in my work, that's how it is. Like I work in sound and sound design, and sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that work the best. And I'm sure it's the same thing with development too.
Armeanio and I've sort of spoken on this a couple of times as well. Is say you've got a game developer and you've got sort of the user walking through the gameplay experience, and the developer themselves said, they'll never try and walk through a wall or something, and lo and behold, Noah just turns right and goes through the wall and just glitches out the entire game, and all hell breaks loose. So little things like that.
Yeah, retail has a funny way of finding ways to do that every single time.
You know, and that can happen. And I would like to really reiterate that you know, you look at like what Chris Ray did with ErgoHack 2, right? He came in with an idea. Simply came in with an idea. Now he's already, you know, I think he's already given out a couple of loans just from coming in with an idea, connecting with the right set of people that could make that idea a reality. There's a lot of value in that. And having things that are open source, you know, it not only it provides a broad tool set that people can potentially build with that's continuing to grow, and the understanding of how to do things properly continues to increase over time. But it creates a nice environment where neat ideas can, you know, find a life. There's a lot of ecosystems out there where they'll have a big project spin up that's, you know, somebody came in with money, paid for private development, is calling it a DApp, put it out. And it's like, okay, I get that there's like a niche service there, but what does it even offer the community beyond the service, right?
Yeah, the value aspect.
To some degree, it creates like a dependency. Like, you know, that's where the value of the ecosystem is. And if nobody can see or reuse or rebuild or play or learn from that, it's more of a dependency than an asset. You know, so it's liability.
And to bring it back to the original conversation, then if there is something like a bridge hack related to that protocol, then, you know, the whole community's underwater.
Yeah.
Just Noah mentioned that you might sort of have a nefarious actor or something along those lines, but even someone who may not have that intention initially, and then sort of just in regards to the open source side of things, and they chop and change and they actually find an exploit. We just hope that within our ecosystem anyway, they have the right hat on, or the right colored hat anyway, and sort of bring that to light and sort of not drain everything for what it's worth.
And there's always some value to having bounties, right? And, you know, I think it'd even be interesting longer term as we see DAO frameworks and joint tooling in terms of spending come together. You know, maybe we should have like 0-day hack bug bounties that are community driven rather than just project driven, to where if there is a, you know, systemic risk to a major DApp or a major application or a major thing, there's an incentive there that somebody might say, okay, well, you know, hacking $190 million is probably an adrenaline rush during the actual, you know, process of it. But then what happens when like the reality settles? What happens, you know, if you get caught?
Yeah, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to do it if you've acquired these things in questionable ways? Where say there might be I just throw a random number out there, say a $10 million bounty for like a white hat sort of thing. At least you acquired those goods in legal ways, and you don't have to sleep with one eye open for the rest of your lifetime.
No, it's something to think about anyway.
Yeah, it's a good question, honestly. Like if you if you come across 200 mil USDC in a hack, what the hell do you do with it? You know, like I feel like our economy isn't yet at a point where you can go and buy goods with crypto very easily. I know there's services that
you gotta hide. So. Number one, you gotta hide. Like it's in a way, it's no different than a theft in reality. You gotta exit the scene of the crime, and you gotta cover your ass. Yeah, you gotta cover your ass one way or another, get out of there, and then figure out how you can, essentially move it without being detected. That's no different than like a traditional robbery in a certain sense.
It's like the hack is just the first part. The work is not done yet. Yeah.
The problem for me is just my conscience will just eat me away, just slowly and surely. It'll just chew at me, and I'd end up just turning myself in or handing things over, or I wouldn't be able to sleep at night eventually.
You're good, man.
I can see that. Well, it's a hard question. I think that if you have the right incentive out there, people will take it. But then do you have the right environment to basically attract and provide the service for that incentive? And if it's closed, maybe not. Hard to say.
Yeah.
Something that we should sort of start opening that topic in the discussion in the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show you that audits are important, but human nature still applies, right? It's not like you take your car to a mechanic and they fix it right every time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very well put. And we're just coming up onto time now, gentlemen. I think it's been another sort of fruitful discussion. Unfortunately, the topic sort of just keeps arising. Is there any sort of last words you want to have in discussion in regard to this?
Me personally, I just wish that our space focused a lot less on marketing and selling things and focused more on security assumptions.
Yep. Very well put.
Mine would be I would be happy to help anybody in the community that has questions about understanding this stuff. I'm still learning too, but like I said before, trying to understand assumptions and trying to understand GitHub repos and all the nitty-gritty technical stuff, it can be overwhelming. So if anybody ever has questions, feel free to hit me up. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, by all means. I think that sort of goes for anyone in the ecosystem. I think that's probably a good thing in regard to all the Ergonaut ecosystem. Everyone is willing to help out where they can. I think that's sort of one thing I hope we don't lose anyway in regards to sort of the Ergo principles if and when we do sort of grow in that respect. For myself, I just like to say, I just hope we don't get complacent. Personally, obviously, sort of keep questioning everything. Yeah, I think that's sort of just my sort of last terms. All right, gentlemen, it's great chatting once again. Hope to provided some sort of great insight in regard to sort of these assumptions, and hope just gets retail thinking about the bigger picture and all these sort of things. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Stay safe out there, everyone.
Yeah, it's a wild one. Take care.